Welcome to Kris versus everybody. This is a podcast where I do every week, unedited, uncensored. This podcast is brought to you by the Crisscross YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, hit that follow button to stay up to date with every new episode as it drops. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for your support. It's not looking good for Donald Trump. I've said this 10 years ago when he was elected the first time. I said it when he was up for election again in 2020 and lost. We listened. We were excelling as a country, even though inflation hit and jobs were lost. And people were dying because of a pandemic. And then we tried to warn people again in 2024 about what this man did in his first term. But nobody wanted to listen because they were worried about my job and gas prices and groceries and eggs and milk. Like, eggs and milk are like the least of your problems when you're talking about a man who doesn't care about if you can't afford eggs and milk. I don't even think Donald Trump knows what the price of eggs and milk are. And that's someone who shouldn't be the president of the United States. Now, listen closely, because this isn't just about politics. It's about power. Every 4 years, we're told the same thing: vote, and everything will just be fine. But what happens when the person who wins the election decides that the rules just don't apply to him anymore? What happens when truth becomes optional? What happens when institutions become enemies? What happens when accountability becomes partisan? That's where impeachment comes in. Not as a slogan, but as a threat. Definitely a threat with this president of the United States. It is the Constitution's emergency brake. And that brings us to Mr. Donald J. Trump, the 45th and 47th president of the United States. The only president, mind you, there have been other presidents who've been impeached, rightfully so. But Donald Trump is the only president in U.S. history to be impeached twice. That should be the biggest red flag that people going to the polls in 2024 should have had in the back of their heads. But no, we didn't want Kamala Harris to be president. After she told us what this man was going to do, after she told us what she's going to do when she goes to office, she was actually going to help the American people. Donald Trump had no plan to help the American people. All he was talking about was immigration, the border, immigration, the border, immigration, the border. Like that had anything to do with milk and bread prices. Let's talk about the impeachment, the possible third impeachment of Donald J. Trump. Not as a cable news drama, but not as a partisan shouting match, but as one of the most serious moments in modern American history. Because impeachment is not whether you like a president. And for full disclosure, for people listening to this podcast, I hate Donald Trump. He should have never been president to begin with. We should have had at least 4 years with Hillary. And if Joe Biden ran in 2020 against Hillary, we could have had another Joe Biden or a second Hillary term, and then possibly a Kamala Harris, or even a female conservative president. Either way, all those options are better than what we've got for the last 10 years. Last 10 years, we had a Donald Trump presidency that undid everything Obama did, including pandemic response which delved this country 1,000,000 plus deaths in 2020, 2021 alone. That's when we had to get him out of there. That was the last straw. We got Joe Biden in. But by the time Joe Biden got in, we were coming out of the pandemic, and companies got greedy. They rose prices on everything. So then Biden passed a bill, the Pandemic Response Act, to bring everything back down. But by every time everything got back down, Trump was back in office again. And he's told us that he's going to go after everybody. He wasn't going to follow the rules. That he was going to undo everything that Biden did, in spite of the American people. Because when you did that, Donald Trump, when you did it twice, you did it when Obama wasn't president, when Obama was president, you said you were going to undo everything he did, including the Affordable Care Act, which you're still trying to do with no alternative. That's why we had a government shutdown a few months ago. It's not about red versus blue anymore. And it's definitely not about revenge. This is not about us versus them versus us. Impeachment is about accountability. It's about limits on power. And it's about whether the rules apply to everyone, even the most powerful person in the country. The founders didn't trust the kings. That's why they invented this country. In 1776, which is 250 years ago, they didn't trust the kings. And they didn't trust unchecked power. That's why impeachment exists. It's not a weapon, it's a safeguard. Donald Trump was impeached twice. I'm going to say that one more time. I might say it a few more times in this episode, because a lot of people just don't understand. Even conservatives, the GOP, people on the right, want this man out of office. That's how bad this man is. The fact alone matters. No other US president, not Nixon, because he quit, not Clinton, even though he didn't fuck her in the back of the White House. They weren't impeached twice. That tells us something extraordinary was happening. The first impeachment centered on the abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Okay, the allegation. This is Trump's impeachment. So the first one was about abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The allegation was very simple and profound. The president used U.S. foreign policy to pressure another country to investigate a political rival, which was, I believe it was Ukraine on Joe Biden. Pretty much blackmailing him. This was during the 2020 election. They tried to get blackmail on Joe Biden because they believed that Joe Biden and his son were getting kickbacks, basically, from the Ukrainian government. Strip away the names and party labels and ask yourself, should any president be allowed to do that? If the answer is no, the impeachment wasn't radical. It was responsible. The second one, which is one that I don't understand why people think of it as two different stories, but the second impeachment, whether you're Democrat, Republican, American, or Canadian, the second impeachment was way more serious. It was about January 6th, 2021. When a fair election, when people like to say it was an unfair election, it was the biggest election, that there was the most participated election in U.S. history. Part so because the pandemic kind of forced people to do absentee and mail-in ballots. Prior to the pandemic, mostly people in Republican and red states used to do all the time. But when it became Joe Biden that won, it became a problem to Donald Trump and his people, including Pence. Mike Pence also said that that was not fair. But to everyone's shock, Mike Pence was like, hey, we lost fair and square. Let me go down to the Capitol and certify these votes. Donald Trump was like, no, we ain't doing that. And to make it more worse, I'm going to send my people down there. I'm going to call everybody down to Washington to stop the vote. That's what it was called, everybody. Stop the vote. So the House of Representatives in Congress and the vice president had to certify the votes. That's how it works in this country. And he also said, this is what Donald Trump said. He said that he will go down there with y'all, the people that were mad that Trump lost the election, hardcore MAGA people. He said that he would go down with y'all. I don't think I saw him at that rally. I don't think I saw him at the Stop the Vote rally. I saw it. We saw it live on Instagram, live on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CBS News, BBC, TV One. We didn't see him there. We didn't see that man there. But it was 2021. And Twitter has a way. Facebook and Twitter has a way of starting revolutions. Mike Pence went in there to certify the vote. Donald Trump texted or tweeted at the time, because it wasn't called X yet. He tweeted that they are doing the vote right now. Fight like hell, he said. This is the quote unquote. These are facts. He said, fight like hell, or you won't have a country anymore. Those people took his word seriously and fought like hell. And that's what you saw on January 6th, 2021. That is what you saw. A violent attack on the U.S. Capitol. The biggest attack on the U.S. Capitol since 1812, when the British set it on fire. An effort to disrupt the certification of a free and fair election. After months of false claims of a stolen vote, pressure on state officials, and refusal to accept the peaceful transfer of power. That's what happened for the second impeachment. He was impeached twice. That wasn't policy disagreement. That was a challenge to democracy itself. Some people say impeachment failed because Trump wasn't removed from office. That misunderstands its purpose. Impeachment is not about removal. It's about the record, the precedent, and the warning that in 2024, 66% of this country didn't care about. They didn't care about it. Congress formally declared that this behavior crossed the line. History now reflects that judgment. Others argue the impeachment was very divisive. But accountability is often divisive. Justice is uncomfortable. Silence is more dangerous. Because if a president can undermine elections or abuse of power without consequence, then the office itself becomes untethered from the law. Here's the harder truth. Impeachment exposed not just Trump's actions, but the weakness of our political courage. The Senate failed to convict, not because the evidence was lacking, but because party loyalty outweighed constitutional duty. And when loyalty to a person becomes stronger than loyalty to democracy, the system cracks. Now, a lot of y'all are saying, what about Clinton and Monica Lewinsky? Well, Clinton and Monica Lewinsky wasn't starting an insurrection, and it wasn't using blackmail from another country to stop your political opponents. That's not what happened. This wasn't a Nixon and Watergate, okay? And it wasn't the impeachment of the other presidents in the 1800s. This was Bill Clinton's impeachment wasn't for that. So shut the fuck up about that. All right? We're talking about Donald Trump on this episode. All right? When loyalty to a person becomes stronger than loyalty to democracy, the system is just then broken. Trump didn't just test policies, he tested the institutions. He went against the courts, the press, intelligence agencies, elections, even the idea of objective truth. When every referee is labeled corrupt, the game collapses. Impeachment became the system's last attempt to say, rules still exist. And let's be clear, holding Trump accountable does not mean pretending America was perfect before him. It means recognizing that the scale matters, pattern matters, intent matters. January 6th didn't happen in isolation. It was the result of sustained rhetoric designed to delegitimize democracy unless it produced a favorable outcome. Impeachment didn't tear the country apart. The erosion of shared reality did. Impeachment was the response, not the cause. So why does impeachment matter? Because democracies don't collapse all at once. They erode slowly through excuses, through normalization, through silence. Impeaching Donald Trump wasn't about punishing a man. It was about defending an idea that no one is above the Constitution. Not a president, not a party, not a movement. The verdict history will remember isn't just whether Donald Trump was removed from office. It's whether the country recognized the warning signs when they appeared, whether we treated accountability as optional or essential. Because impeachment is not the end of the story. Elections matter. The courts matter. Civic memory matters. And what we tolerate today becomes precedent tomorrow. The real question isn't why Donald Trump was impeached. The question is whether the next time a president crosses the line, we'll have the courage to pull the brake again, or whether we'll pretend the line was never there. That's not a partisan question. And that has been another episode of Kris versus Everybody. See y'all next time.